Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning to explore the connections between meaningfulness and sustainability. Hold on a moment while I just work out these slides. Great, thank you. So in 1968's speech to the University of Kansas, Robert Kennedy remarked that when we prioritize GDP, we leave out most of the things that make our lives worth living, including meaning and purpose. And reflecting upon sustainability challenges, it seems to me more important than ever that we should seek to remedy this blindness. So my aim here today is to introduce you to the idea of the meaningful city, in the hopes that I might be able to persuade you that meaningfulness in life and in work is a relevant topic for you as leaders, workers, citizens, family members, and individuals. So, smart and sustainable city concepts dominate how we study cities. In this review, Young and colleagues found that the concept of livable cities trails in city research. Now, I know that academics can be well behind practitioners, but this does lead me to ask, where are the people in smart and sustainable city initiatives? In our project on the meaningful city, we're tracking a number of themes related to human and value-based philosophy of the city. And to bring people back into the heart of smart and sustainable city initiatives, we need to think about the lives, the kinds of lives that people are leading. And in this endeavour, a very important and neglected theme is the meaningfulness of lives and work. But do we have a crisis of meaning? And if we do, does it matter? Worries about meaningfulness may seem rather trivial, perhaps even selfish, in the face of current global turbulence. But impacts from technological shifts and globalization do seem to be producing a kind of frustration with the way in which we live, perhaps expressed most obviously in a rising sense of alienation. A loss of meaning and purpose for some people, which is affecting our politics and social fabric. And if indeed there are these connections, meaningfulness certainly does matter. In worrying about justice and meaningfulness, Oxford philosophers Ingmar Persson and Julian Savulescu argue that unequal access to the goods of meaningfulness means that some people's lives are often less meaningful than other people's lives through no fault or voluntary choice of their own. And one way in which we may be concerned about a loss of meaning is the harmful effects upon people who are caught up in the displacement of work and deindustrialization. And of course, cities are key drivers of these changes. In left behind communities, harms to well-being include what Angus Deaton and Anne Case cheerily call deaths of despair, where a loss of meaning in life makes people vulnerable to poor mental and physical health outcomes. And in his work on the Glasgow effect, Professor Sir Harry Burns found widespread health inequalities in people whose families had experienced the disruption of deindustrialization. He found that adverse childhood experiences led to premature mortality arising from drugs, alcohol misuse, suicides, violence, and accidents. And in a BBC Radio 4 interview, Burns argues that public policy needs to tackle the social, environmental, and economic dislocation felt by people in order to help them regain a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And he says that this would necessitate innovations in social cohesion, which move away from doing things to people rather than doing things with people. But what do we mean by meaningfulness? And can we really think that we could create meaningfulness for one another in the places where we live and work? Viktor Frankl famously called our human need for meaningfulness the will to meaning. And this is a fundamental human drive and extremely difficult to eliminate. The philosopher Susan Wolfe makes meaningfulness a distinct moral value, and she coins this useful phrase that meaningfulness arises when subjective attraction meets objective attractiveness. In other words, people experience meaningfulness when they're actively involved with things of independent value. And these things could be anything that we could think of, such as ideas, activities, people, animals, places, and organizations. But these things are also emotionally engaging. They attract us to them because of their emotional content. But when we incorporate morally valuable persons or other valuable things into the meaningfulness of our lives, this does not mean that we can do anything we like to them. Meaningfulness involves a concern for how well things are going for those valuable objects and how we can promote their welfare. Living a life of ethical care has something to offer us, particularly in current times. But to make this a viable route to meaningfulness, we would need to bring to public prominence some undervalued and latent sources of meaning, such as stewardship, repair, empathy, and love. And the philosopher Harry Frankfurt, in The Importance of What We Care About, argues that loving is a very powerful source of universal meaning. He says, locating the source of meaning in the activity of loving renders opportunities for meaningful life much more readily accessible. From the Meaning in Life literature, we know there's a connection between meaningfulness and the density and diversity of meaning sources which orientate us beyond the self. And here, generativity, care, and significance are particularly important for integrating different sources of meaning into a meaningful life. Cities, of course, provide a very rich variety of meaning sources, but city structures, processes, and institutions can also hinder the search for meaning. They can make it more difficult for people to integrate these productive sources of meaning into their lives and work. And not only do we need favourable structures if we're going to be able to be successful in integrating these meaning sources into our lives, we also need capabilities. When we accept responsibilities to look after, to steward, repair, and to maintain things which matter to us, we need to develop the skills and knowledge to do so. And we also need to be able to evaluate how well we're doing in caring for these things which make our lives meaningful. In other words, we need to produce measures and ways of thinking about things that go beyond GDP. So how do we apply these insights to cities? Smart and sustainable city initiatives promise to improve lives through environmental respect, technological innovation, and giving citizens a voice. But we all know very well that this is not at all an easy process. There are tensions between smart and sustainable city goals and the needs and life aspirations of different city people. Motivating successful innovation means allowing people to contribute their different perspectives and meanings, to be able to interact with data, technology, and architecture, and to become involved in design. Participation in this way not only provides the social basis for embedding innovation, but also provides the context in which we help one another to create meaningful lives. So it's the active working and contributing of people which creates meaningfulness. And in this process model of the meaningful city, the two key elements of meaningfulness which I discussed earlier on, objective worth and subjective attraction, are integrated by citizens who are confident in speaking up about what matters to them and who can exercise the relevant capabilities for taking care of these things. And this means creating forms of participation which involves us in processes of discovering, curating, interpreting, and communicating meanings. The institutional fabric is particularly important. Non-inclusive city institutions can make some of us more vulnerable to the harms which come with a loss of meaning. And there are some really important power questions here, including who gets to make meanings? How do they use them? And does this give rise to some being able to craft meaningful lives at the expense of others? So the key question for me is, can we design city institutions, organisations, structures and places so that they help as many people as possible to experience meaningfulness in their lives and in their work? Here's a summary of some of the practices and outcomes which help to build meaningfulness in work, organisations and life. And just as a note here, most of my research, I look at meaningfulness, but I also look at the interaction between meaningfulness and mutuality. And I argue that mutuality is a very important organising principle which is capable of unlocking organisational and system-level meaningfulness. Experienced meaningfulness requires a rich organisational meaning system, including various sources of positive meaning and practices which encourage people to voice their different understandings and perspectives of those meanings. And Raub and Blunshy found in a UK hotel chain that being involved in or having an awareness of corporate social responsibility initiatives gave service employees a sense of making a positive difference to the lives of others. And this awareness helped them to craft a sense of personal meaningfulness. However, they also found that meaningfulness can be thwarted if employees are obliged to take part in CSR initiatives. And you might think that this might not be possible, but I have done interviews in organisations where employees have had this experience. And such interviews can look self-indulgent when employees' own work is of poor quality or is unfairly rewarded. Meaningfulness is less likely to be experienced in organisations which make no attempt to secure justice in production, distribution, and interaction. And justice which is supportive of meaningfulness means developing organisational practices which are consistent with fairness, trust, and concern, and which extends to all stakeholders, including employees, but beyond. In a related point, meaningfulness practices ought not to be used to distract workers from abuses of power or to co-opt them into ideological practices. Irrespective of the subjective experience of meaningfulness, poor quality work is poor quality work. And we need to make sure that we keep our sights firmly set on the objective dimension of meaningfulness, of morally worthy purpose, as well as the requirement that work is structured by the goods of meaningfulness. And for me, the goods of meaningfulness are freedom, autonomy, and dignity. So can smart and sustainable cities unlock meaningfulness? In our research project, my colleagues and I have been looking at city projects where we might find some kind of emerging architecture for meaningfulness. And King's Cross is a distinctive example of private enterprise helping to produce public benefits, but where the challenge lies in handing off to future generations. In a set of public sector-led initiatives, Finnish cities are grappling with developing the ability of citizens to participate. In both of these cases, new sources of meaning are being created, as well as new opportunities for people to contribute to things that really matter, and a broader consideration of how to bring down the institutional barriers to them being able to do so. In the end, what is the purpose of cities? Under a model of the meaningful city, I suggest here that their moral purpose is the maintenance of the long-term and generational and sustainable life value of humans, animals, and the natural world. Life value includes here not only material goods, but the goods which are needed for leading meaningful lives. And here are some of the structural elements a sustainable city system needs for combining technological, material, and human resources, elements which also allow us to design in meaningful lives for as many people as possible. Finally, I think there's a vital point of connection between meaningfulness and human civilization. Jane Jacobs, a heroine to many of us, quotes Oliver Wendell Holmes, who links the value of civilization, complexity, and the experience of a fuller, richer life. What I think we can learn from this is that sustainability may depend upon investing in the human capabilities of all of our citizens. We must endow each other with the responsibility for creating the morally valuable goods which are needed for sustainability and which we can use to craft meaningful lives. And in this effort, cities have a vital role to play. Thank you very much.